Hey everyone, I'm going to show you why mainstream Christians need the biblical diet. So, what is the biblical diet? Well, God didn't just give us a blueprint for our spiritual health, He gave us a blueprint for our physical health. Secular people will opt for wisdom of man, and that's hard because there's 100 different fad diets that change each year, and unfortunately, often a lot of Christians fall for that, which makes it really hard to figure out what you're supposed to be eating. Now, I am not going to trust my health or my children's health on that. I'm going to lean on God's understanding. Makes it way easier, and I don't need to worry about it. I don't even need to be a doctor. People would say, oh, you're not a nutritionist. It doesn't matter. We have a God-given intellect that we can decide what makes sense and what is healthy to put into our bodies, and we have an instruction manual in the Bible. We don't need any credentials to allow us to make these decisions. What's more is studies and facts, like all these things that people are so obsessed with these days. Yes, they're interesting at times, they're useful at times, but studies are so rampant with error because of the reproducibility crisis. Look that up if you haven't heard of it. It's basically saying that researchers cannot even reproduce their own results. They can't show that the results are reproducible, consistent, reliable, and let alone have another researcher reproduce their results. So that brings into question all their conclusions about what is healthy or unhealthy, and it can't be trusted. That's why we must lean on God, not our own understanding. Proverbs 5, verses 5 and 8. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. He's telling you it's going to benefit your physical well-being if you follow him. So we're going to look at the Bible and see how it tells us to eat. Before we get too far, let's just recognize that yes, man has adulterated and manipulated God's design a little bit. So we need to be aware of these things. Namely, GMOs is something that pops up. Leviticus 19:19, this is a violation of that command. GMOs is a violation of that command. You shall not let your livestock breed with another kind. You shall not sow your field with mixed seed. God has a design laid out in creation that like kinds beget like kinds. So man should not be manipulated with that. GMOs take different DNA and splice it together. That's a violation of that. Now, hybrids are fine, like of seed varieties and animal varieties. Hybrids are fine. That's just taking the existing system of, in the case of plants, like pollination, you put two plant species next to each other in the garden that are like a related species, they're going to cross-pollinate. That's fine. That's by God's design. Even seedless I don't think there's any seedless, at least in the store, that are GMO. They're just selected for something that had a mutation through its cross-pollination or pollination. That's fine. God allows that. If you look further than that, just like the manipulation, there's also just packaging of foods that is not the way that we were meant to have it. It's not a whole food anymore. Sifted flour, they would have been eating fresh milled flour. Sifted flour has been taken apart. Like they take piece parts of the grain, after they grind it, they separate it. And even whole wheat, they're taking the bran, germ, and endosperm, I think, are the components, separating them, making them shelf stable, and then putting them back together. But in the process, they're, destroying the nutrient value of it. So this is not what we want. Pasteurized and homogenized dairy is the same thing. They would have been eating raw. Man will try to tell you that raw dairy is horrible and deadly. No, I will trust God, not man. So avoid processed foods. I guess that's the last thing. Like anything with an ingredients label. God's foods don't come with an ingredients label. And if you can't read or if you don't understand what's on that label, it's probably not a food. Yes, marketing teams sometimes get a little fancy with scientific names for things that are perfectly harmless, but for the most part, it's not the case. And if you don't recognize it, it's probably not a food. So just avoid that altogether. Now, why should we be paying attention to this stuff? Why are we looking to the Bible for food laws or food guidance? Well, the first violation of man was the violation of a food law. So listen up about the food laws, basically, and all his laws, really. Genesis 2, verse 16 to 17. Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of that, you shall surely die. Okay, so what can we eat? Well, he says in Genesis 1:29 that we can eat every plant and tree bearing seed. And God said, see, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. I would hope that you would understand this is organic. This is not pesticide laden. This is not grown out of the fields that were pre-sprayed with herbicide. No, this is perfectly natural from the ground the way God intended. In Leviticus, it says that what animals on the earth we're going to eat and what animals of the sea we're going to eat. So he talks about, things that are chewing the cud. Let's just read it. Leviticus 11:3. Among the animals, whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hooves and chewing the cud, that you may eat. Grass-fed, they're not on feedlots in the way God intended, eating a bunch of grain, grass-fed. And then these you may eat of all that are in the water, whatever in the water has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, that you may eat. So no pig, no shrimp, no shellfish, no catfish, nothing like that. Dairy. We see God is giving these people a promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. So dairy and honey, all good. Deuteronomy 6:2-3. Fear the Lord your God and keep his statutes and his commandments, that it may be well with you and that you may multiply greatly as the Lord God of your fathers has promised you, a land flowing with milk and honey. Eggs. Eggs are indirectly mentioned as a food item in Deuteronomy 22:6-7. If a bird's nest happens to be before you along the way, in any tree or on the ground, with young ones or eggs, with the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall surely let the mother go, and take the young for yourself, that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days. Okay, this is obviously about stewardship and caring for the natural resources around you, and valuing life. But it's implied that God expects us to be foraging for, collecting, and eating eggs. So eggs are on the menu. Wheat. Of course, fresh milled sourdough. There's not enough time to go through all the verses praising wheat. It says, we have, give us our daily bread. This is something that was expected to be eaten all the time and a staple item. You can't even celebrate his feasts if you can't eat bread, because the feast of unleavened bread, kicked off by Passover, mandates that we eat bread. Leviticus 23, verses 5-6. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight is the Lord's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. Don't let anyone tell you that he's saying celebrate by eating something bad for you. Jesus fed 5,000. He could have gone the paleo route. He had fish there, but no, he said fish and bread. So Matthew 14:19-21, he took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking up to the heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitudes. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments that remained. Now those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Let's talk about not just eating the bread, but what if you can't eat the bread? Well, that's a curse. God says in his curses in Deuteronomy 28, specifically in 49 and 51, the Lord will bring a nation against you from afar. They shall not leave you grain or new wine or oil or the increase of your cattle or the offspring of your flocks until they have destroyed you. It's a curse to not have grain. And Jesus, the best gift of all, describes himself as the bread of life. John 6:47-48. Most assuredly I say to you, he who believes in me has everlasting life. I am the bread of life. All right, moving on. I know we're going through a lot of stuff here, but we're trying to go fast. We got a lot to cover. Olive oil. Not a seed oil. That's the key. Seed oils are so prevalent today, and just look at how seed oils are made, and you'll see that this is not food. It's a very industrialized, chemically laden process to produce something that is clearly not meant to be eaten, but then is served out to the masses as food. Not food. Just eat olive oil and anything that resembles olive oil. Avocado oil, things that are made from the flesh of the fruit or whatever product, coconut oil. Not seed oils. That's what you need to avoid. And olive oil is, again, just as something described in the promised land. So Deuteronomy 8, verses 7-9. Your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of wheat and barley. There we go again. Of vine and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey. A land in which you will eat bread without scarcity. The blessing, not the curse. In which you will lack nothing. Okay. Salt. Salt in Matthew 5:13 is represented as a very good thing. You are the salt of the earth, His followers, Jesus' followers are the salt of the earth. Anytime we are making a metaphor for a good thing, we are going to use a good thing to figuratively represent that. Otherwise, it would not be very edifying to someone to give them a metaphor that is meant to be a good thing represented by a bad thing. That's very confusing. So we know by metaphors what is good and what is bad. Wine. Good quality wine, of course, organic. I'm not a wine connoisseur. I'm sure you can find better qualities of wine that maybe have less preservatives or things in them. I would love to make my own wine so I knew what went into it. Because we see that Jesus' first miracle in John chapter 2, he turns water into wine at the wedding at Cana. So he's not feeding people with things that's bad for them. Now, obviously, you can take it a little overboard, but as God intended, wine is good. Wine, we are told, makes the heart of man glad. Psalm 104, verses 14 to 15. He causes the grass to grow for the cattle and vegetation for man, that he may bring forth food from the earth, and wine that makes glad the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread which strengthens man's heart. Well water, another one that's promised when they come into the land. It says that in Deuteronomy 6, verses 10 to 11, when the Lord your God brings you into the land to give you large and beautiful cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, hewn out wells which you did not dig. This is a good thing to have control over your water, and more importantly, control over what is in your water. Not a municipal system of water where they put chemicals in it, you have no control over that, and it is not good for you. Just take a cup of municipal water, put a cap on it, let it sit, open it up and smell it later. It smells like pool water. You don't want to be putting that into your body. So this is when you see what the Bible is laying out, it is such a game changer to know that you can trust that this is what I'm supposed to be putting into my body for good fuel. And beyond the sustenance that the food is providing, the food can be providing us or giving us medicine. Paul in 1 Timothy 5 to 23 tells the congregation that he's writing to, no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities. Okay, so food as medicine. In this case, it's acute, but food in good quality and the right food is obviously going to elevate your well-being in general. And God promises that if we follow his commandments, which includes the food commandments, we're going to have length of days. So Deuteronomy 5 verse 33 says, you shall walk in all the ways which the Lord your God has commanded you, that you may live and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. So you can take that to the bank. God's telling you that if you follow him, if you trust him, if you eat how he's showing you to eat, you will live long. Is it possible that there is some truth to this idea of, it's not the same bread as it was back then, or it's not the same food as it was back then? Yes, it is possible. Like, we could say, I shouldn't have, in hindsight, I shouldn't have eaten that thing that I thought was okay because it was in the Bible, but now it's not okay. But you know what? At the end of all this, your life is lived, you're old, you're not going to know what could have possibly given you an extra year. No one could possibly know that except God. And God is the one who ultimately determines how long you live. You could die tomorrow. God is the one who determines these things. You need to trust that his promise that if you follow his commandments, you'll have length of days. You need to trust that. And we see Jesus asserting the dominion of God over this world in Mark 16, verses 17 to 18. He says, and these signs will follow those who believe. They will take up serpents, and if they drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt them. Jesus is saying that no matter what you think may be, harming your body or anything about, your health, God is in control. Okay? God is the one who decides these things. So put your faith in God and have faith that he's going to give you the lifespan that he planned for you, as long as you put in the, base level of effort that's expected of you. Like don't eat things that are totally poisonous to you. Get to that baseline level of health. Now, we've talked about what we put into our body. Food is medicine. Well, the abstaining of food is also important, and it's expected, I would argue. It's only commanded in the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, but it is obviously expected because in Matthew 6 to verses 17 to 18, it says, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face so that you do not appear So when you fast, it's implied that you're going to be fasting. Anoint your head and wash your face so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in a secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. So fasting as important for spiritual health. And how should we fast? Well, if we look at some of the examples that are more clear on what was being done in the fast, like Exodus 34, verse 28, where Moses is fasting, we see Moses was there with the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water. So it's a dry fast. It's not a water fast. And we can actually see studies, and studies are fine if they corroborate divine wisdom. Then we can say, that's kind of cool that we see a study that corroborates what we know is true. We test the study against the Bible, not the other way around. So we see studies that say that dry fasting is very helpful for healing and things like that. Now, I am not convinced that much more than a 24-hour fast would be very beneficial from that perspective of like a bodily benefit, but there could be certainly spiritual benefits from that. So that's something to pray about. I also think I'm not convinced personally that fasting is necessarily intended, certainly not beneficial for pregnant women or nursing, but that's for you to decide because it's not clearly laid out for us. So that's something also to pray about. And we need to understand that the fasting is about the spiritual health first and foremost. Like there are some benefits that we can get physically, but it's about afflicting our bodies and our souls so that we grow closer to God. Deuteronomy 8, verse 3 says, He humbled you, allowed you to hunger, and fed you with manna, that he might make you know that man shall not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that proceeds from the mouth of the Lord. So we need to understand that everything he's giving us to sustain us is coming from God, and we need to be spiritually in tune with that just as much as we're physically following that. So follow the biblical diet, see the benefits, grow in faith. This is an act of faith because, well, again, we have the world telling us, bow down to the altar of science, and these studies that show you that red meat's bad for you, eggs are bad for you, salt's bad for you, all sorts of things, No, we have faith that God, the creator of our bodies, knows better than any man what to fuel our bodies with, and we will live by these commandments, and we are promised to have length of days, and we can take that promise to the bank. So put your faith in God, not man. This is why mainstream Christians need the biblical diet. Thanks again for watching. If you like this and want others to see it, please like and subscribe. That really helps me out. I also encourage you to comment your thoughts, opinions, even your critiques down below. I love to engage with you guys. Also check out my blog and other social media. Thanks again. See ya.